At 9:47 on a Tuesday night in December, someone taped a bright orange notice to my front door. Not a knock, not a phone call, just paper glowing under my own porch lights, threatening me with a $500 fine for the crime of hanging Christmas lights. I didn't know it yet, but that single piece of paper was about to turn my quiet cul-de-sac into the most decorated street in the entire county, and Karen Whitfield's own neighborhood was about to turn against her. My name is Dave Kessler. For 11 years, my wife Nancy and I have lived at 214 Willowbrook Lane, third house on the left in Maple Ridge Estates, a tidy little subdivision outside Columbus with matching mailboxes and a duck pond nobody swims in. We raised our 2 kids here. We planted the oak tree in the front yard the week we moved in. And every December since our daughter Emily was 4 years old, we've strung up Christmas lights the day after Thanksgiving, because that's the day she still calls every single year to ask if the lights are up yet. It's not a competition. We're not the family with the 16-foot inflatable snow globe or the synchronized light show set to a Mariah Carey track. Just warm white icicle lights along the roofline, a wreath on the door, and a small lit-up nativity scene Nancy's mother gave us before she passed. Modest, traditional. The kind of decorations that make a street feel like a neighborhood instead of just a row of houses. For 10 years, nobody said a word about it. Then 2 Decembers ago, Karen Whitfield moved into the house at the end of the cul-de-sac and got herself elected president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association within 4 months. Karen drives a white SUV with a magnetic HOA board member sign she made herself. She carries a clipboard to a neighborhood barbecue, and she has a very specific, very rigid idea of what Maple Ridge should look like, an idea that, as it turns out, does not include colored lights, inflatable snowmen, or anything she considers visual clutter. The first year she was in charge, she sent out a newsletter. Buried on page 3, under a section about mailbox paint colors, was a new rule. All holiday decorations must be removed no later than January 2nd, or owners would face a formal violation notice. Fine, I thought. We always took ours down by early January anyway. I didn't think much of it. I had no idea Karen wasn't just setting a deadline, she was building a case file. And this December, she was finally ready to use it. The trouble started on the first Saturday of December, 3 days after Nancy and I put the lights up. I was raking the last of the leaves when Karen's white SUV rolled slowly past the house, windows down, and stopped right at the end of our driveway. She didn't get out, she just sat there for almost a full minute staring at the roofline before she finally rolled up her window and drove off. That evening the first notice appeared, not the orange one, not yet. This one was a plain white envelope, taped neatly to our storm door, with the Maple Ridge HOA letterhead and Karen's signature at the bottom. Inside was a single typed paragraph informing us that our exterior lighting display had been observed exceeding, in her words, the community standard for tasteful seasonal illumination, and requesting that we reduce the display by half within 7 days. I read it twice. There was no community standard for tasteful seasonal illumination. There never had been. I called Nancy over, and she read it a third time, laughing at first, then not laughing at all, because underneath Karen's signature was a line that said any noncompliance would be escalated to the enforcement committee. The enforcement committee, it turned out, was Karen, her husband Gary, and a retired accountant named Phil who lived 2 streets over and had never once spoken to me directly. I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I emailed the HOA's general account politely and asked which specific bylaw governed the brightness or quantity of holiday lighting, since I'd read through our declaration of covenants and found nothing about it. 3 days passed with no answer. Then on the following Tuesday night, the second notice appeared, the orange one, the official violation notice, citing Section 4.7 Aesthetic Harmony Standards, a section I later discovered Karen had drafted and pushed through a poorly attended board meeting just 6 weeks earlier without a proper homeowner vote. The fine was $500 if the lights weren't reduced by December 15th. Reduced, not removed, just made smaller, dimmer, less visible, according to whatever Karen personally decided counted as harmonious. I stood on my porch that night reading it under our own icicle lights, and for the first time in 11 years living in that house, I felt like a stranger had walked into my front yard and told me my family's tradition was a problem to be solved. What I didn't know yet was that Karen hadn't just sent that notice to us. She'd sent nearly identical letters, word for word, to 6 other houses on our street, all of them dated the same day, all of them threatening the same fine. And she had absolutely no idea that 4 of those 6 households had already started talking to each other in a group text before I even knew the chat existed. That Wednesday morning, my neighbor Frank from across the street knocked on my door holding his own orange notice. Then Priya from 2 doors down showed up 10 minutes later with hers. By noon, it wasn't just my lights on the line. It was the whole cul-de-sacs, and Karen had just picked a fight with 8 houses instead of 1. I decided that same afternoon to actually read our HOA's governing documents front to back for the first time since we bought the house. Nancy thought I was overreacting. I told her I just wanted to know what we'd actually agreed to when we moved in because something about Section 47 didn't sit right with me. It felt new. It felt rushed. And if Karen had written a rule into existence without a real vote, that wasn't a decorating dispute anymore. That was a legal problem, and legal problems have paper trails. I spent that whole evening at the kitchen table with a flashlight and a 3-inch binder of HOA paperwork Nancy's dad had passed down to us when we bought the place, cross-referencing meeting minutes against the bylaws Karen kept quoting. And 2 hours in, I found something that made me sit up straight. The meeting where Section 47 was supposedly adopted had only 9 homeowners present, out of the 61 required for a quorum under our own declaration. Karen's rule wasn't just unpopular. It might not even be legally enforceable. But I wasn't ready to hand that over yet, not until I understood exactly how far she was willing to go to make an example out of us. I got my answer 4 days later, and it came in the form of a certified letter. This one wasn't taped to the door. It arrived by mail, signature required, from a law office representing the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. Karen had escalated. The letter stated that our continued noncompliance with community aesthetic standards would result in a lien being filed against our property if the $500 fine, now accruing daily interest, wasn't paid within 14 days. A lien on our house over Christmas lights. Nancy read that letter standing in the driveway in her coat, and I watched her go from confused to angry to something quieter and more serious, the look she gets when she's done being patient with somebody. "Take the binder to Priya's tonight," she said, "all of it." That night, 6 houses gathered in Priya's living room, orange notices spread across her coffee table like evidence at a trial, because that's basically what it had become. Frank had gotten the same lien threat, so had the Alvarez family on the corner, and so had old Mr. Chen, 81 years old, who'd hung the exact same 4 strings of lights every December for the 18 years he'd lived in Maple Ridge without a single complaint, until now. That's when I laid the binder on the table and told them what I'd found. No quorum, no valid vote. Section 47 wasn't a rule, it was Karen's personal preference typed up to look official. Frank asked the obvious question, "So what do we do, fight the fines one at a time and hope she backs off?" I said no. If Karen wanted to make an example out of one house, we were going to make Maple Ridge impossible for her to make an example of. Because you can't fine an entire neighborhood into silence without the whole neighborhood noticing exactly who's doing the fining. Priya smiled for the first time all evening. "You're saying we all just keep our lights up?" I said we do better than that, we add more. The plan was simple, almost embarrassingly simple once we said it out loud. Instead of one house quietly complying out of fear, every household at that table would keep their existing lights exactly as they were, refuse the reduction, and starting that Friday, add 1 new string of lights or 1 new decoration every single evening. Publicly, visibly. On camera, in case Karen tried anything with the doorbell footage later. Mr. Chen offered to bring an extra strand of lights he'd been saving in his garage for years. Frank said his kids had been begging for an inflatable snowman since October. The Alvarez family had a projector that threw dancing snowflakes across their entire front lawn, still in the box. I emailed the HOA's management company that same night, CCing every homeowner in the group chat, and asked, formally and in writing, for the sign-in sheet and vote count from the meeting where Section 47 was adopted. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't mention lawyers. I just asked for the paperwork, and I let the silence that followed do the talking. Friday night, the lights went up, not just at my house. Every single house that had gotten a violation notice added something new, right on schedule, right in front of anyone driving down Willowbrook Lane. By Saturday, 2 more houses that hadn't even gotten letters joined in out of solidarity. By Sunday, it was 10 houses. By the following Wednesday, it was the entire cul-de-sac, string lights running from mailbox to mailbox like the whole street had agreed to throw one enormous glowing middle finger at a single overreaching HOA president, without anyone saying a rude word out loud. Karen drove past every single night that week, slower each time, longer stops each time, and every night there were more lights than the night before, which meant every night the problem she thought she was solving got visibly, undeniably worse for her and better for the rest of us. By the second Friday, our street looked like something out of a holiday movie, dozens of houses glowing at once, kids from 3 streets over walking down just to see it, and I still hadn't gotten a single response to my records request. So I stopped asking politely. I drove to the county recorder's office that Monday morning, requested the recorded HOA declaration and any amendment filings on public record, and paid the $11 for certified copies. What came back confirmed everything. Section 4.7 had never been filed as an amendment to the recorded declaration at all. Legally, on paper, in the eyes of the county, it didn't exist. Karen had been fining people and now threatening a lien over a rule that had never actually become part of our HOA's governing documents. I also pulled something else while I was there almost as an afterthought. The contact information for the Ohio Attorney General's Consumer Protection Section, which handles complaints against homeowners associations that violate the Ohio Planned Community Act, along with a state statute that requires any HOA fine or lien to be based on a properly adopted, properly recorded rule. That night, I typed up everything. The county recorder's confirmation that Section 4.7 was never filed. The meeting minutes showing only 9 homeowners present against a 61-person quorum requirement. The dates on all 8 violation notices, all backdated to look consistent even though 3 of them, I could prove from time-stamped photos, had been printed and delivered before the alleged observation of the display Karen claimed to have made. And a copy of the state statute making clear that liens based on invalid rules could expose board members personally, not the HOA, to legal liability. I requested an emergency spot on the agenda for the next board meeting. Under our bylaws, any homeowner could do that with 5 signatures. I had 31 within 2 hours of asking. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday, in the clubhouse behind the pool nobody used in December. And this time, quorum wasn't going to be a problem because 42 homeowners showed up, more than the entire history of Maple Ridge board meetings combined. Karen ran that meeting the way she ran everything, clipboard in hand, agenda printed on cardstock, gavel actually purchased from somewhere because of course she had one. She opened with a statement about protecting community values and maintaining property values through visual consistency, looking directly at me and Frank and Priya while she said it, like we were the problem she needed the room to see. I waited until public comment. Then I stood up, walked to the front with the binder and set 8 things on the table in front of her, one at a time. First, the county recorder's certified letter stating Section 4.7 was never filed as an amendment. Karen's face didn't move, but her hand did, tapping the gavel once against the table, a nervous habit I recognized instantly because Nancy does the same thing with her car keys when she's caught in a lie. Second, the meeting minutes proving only 9 of 61 required homeowners were present when the rule was supposedly adopted. Someone in the back row, I think it was Mr. Chen's daughter, said that's not even close, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Third, I laid out the timestamped photos proving 3 violation notices were printed before Karen's claimed observation dates. You wrote these before you even drove by, I said, which means you weren't enforcing a rule, you were looking for an excuse. Karen tried to interrupt, something about board discretion and the spirit of the community guidelines, but Gary, sitting beside her, had gone very quiet, and Phil, the retired accountant, had actually pulled his own copy of the bylaws out of his jacket pocket and was flipping through it himself. Fourth, I read aloud slowly the relevant section of the Ohio Planned Community Act stating that fines and liens must be based on validly adopted, recorded rules, and that board members who knowingly enforce invalid rules can be held personally, individually liable for damages. I watched that word personally land on every single board member's face at the same moment, because a $500 fine against a homeowner is one thing. A lawsuit naming Karen Whitfield personally is an entirely different conversation. I finished by saying I wasn't there to demand Karen's resignation or an apology or even to embarrass anyone, though at that point the room had done most of that work on its own. I was there to formally request, on the record with 42 witnesses, that the board rescind all 8 violation notices, cancel the threatened lien, and confirm in writing within 7 days that Section 4.7 was void. Priya seconded the motion before I'd even finished the sentence. Frank seconded it again, just to be sure. Mr. Chen, 81 years old, stood up on his own without anyone helping him and said in a voice steadier than I expected that he'd lived in this neighborhood for 18 years and had never once been treated like a criminal for hanging 4 strings of lights his late wife used to help him put up, and he wanted that on the record too. You could have heard a pin drop in that clubhouse. Karen looked at Gary, Gary looked at Phil. Phil closed the bylaws, set them on the table, and said the 4 words I'd been waiting 9 days to hear. The motion carries unanimously. Every violation notice was rescinded that night on the record with witnesses and minutes. The threatened lien was withdrawn in writing within 48 hours, hand-delivered by the HOA's own management company, not by Karen. And within 3 weeks, at a special board meeting called by petition, 49 signatures this time, Karen Whitfield was voted out as HOA president. She stayed on the board another 2 months, silent in every meeting I attended after that, before quietly not renewing her position when the next election came around. Mr. Chen's lights stayed up that whole December, all 4 strings brighter than ever. The Alvarez family's snowflake projector ran every single night straight through New Year's. Frank's kids got their inflatable snowman, a little crooked, leaning slightly to the left, and nobody on that street ever once complained about it. As for our own lights, the ones that started this whole thing, we didn't take them down on January 2nd like Karen's old rule demanded. We left them up an extra week just because we could, and because Emily called that year like she does every to ask if the lights were up, and for the first time in a long time I got to tell her the whole story of exactly what they meant. Here's what I keep coming back to months later. Karen Whitfield thought she was protecting property values. What she actually did was remind an entire street of people who barely used to wave at each other that we were still a neighborhood, not just a collection of driveways with a shared mailbox design. She wanted less light on Willowbrook Lane. She ended up giving us the brightest December we've ever had. If you've ever dealt with an HOA that forgot it works for the homeowners instead of the other way around, you already know exactly how this story felt to live through. Tell me in the comments if your neighborhood has its own Karen, because I guarantee I'm not the only one with a binder full of receipts. And if this story kept you here till the very end, you already know what the subscribe button is for. I'll see you in the next one.